and to help caregivers because of the lack of support, or should I say the harmful support that my father received. And I came to realize it doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter your status in life, that caregivers, even though they may have the title, especially those who work in some facilities, they may have the title of a CNA or a caregiver or a support person, but they don't always have the training. Right. They don't always have the understanding, the compassion, the wherewithal to be able to really care for someone else with a dementia. Right. It's a difference caring for someone with a broken leg, with sniffles, than it is caring for someone with a dementia. If I help caregivers take better care of themselves, then they may reciprocate that to their care recipient.
Greetings and salutations. I'm your host, Alicia Mullings, and this is the Sense Only podcast. This is a podcast for people who are tired of the noise of the world, the distraction in the world, and the disconnection in the world. It's also for people who know that we need to be the change that we would like to see in the world. Today, you can see that I'm not in my usual space. You're probably like, Alicia, where has your set gone? My set has not gone anywhere. It's me that jumped on the plane and found myself to Atlanta. And the reason I found myself to Atlanta is because my next guest is an absolutely amazing, wonderful person that we could have done this virtual. And I was like, no, I'm coming to you. This lady has achieved so many things. She's currently doing so many things. I've just had the pleasure of being on her podcast also, and I'm going to put that in the description so you can go and check that out as well. But she will tell you all about it in that conversation. I present to you the wonderful Dr. Laurie James, and please tell us about your wonderful self.
Oh, my wonderful self. My. I am Laurie James, and my wonderful friends call me Dr. Laurie, and that's okay. And I have a foundation that I started in honor of my father. And actually, it's a little deeper than that. I started the foundation called the James Dixon Foundation for Alzheimer's Research and Support, named after my father. But I started it because I was angry, depressed, frustrated. And out of all of that anger came the desire to help, and to help caregivers because of the lack of support, or should I say the harmful support that my father received from caregivers. And I came to realize it doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter your status in life, that caregivers, even though they may have the title, especially those who work in some facilities, they may have the title of a CNA or a caregiver or a support person, but they don't always have the training. Right. They don't always have the understanding, the compassion, the wherewithal to be able to really care for someone else with a dementia. Right. It's a difference caring for someone with a broken leg, with sniffles, than it is caring for someone with a dementia. And then my other thought was, if I help caregivers take better care of themselves, then they may reciprocate that to their care recipient. And so that's why I started the foundation.
Amazing. And from starting the foundation, in terms of what you initially felt this journey would look like, how has that changed from the thought and from the passion and the desire to start to where it stands now?
I started it with a box. I should have brought the box in here. We could have shown it. I started it with a box, and it was called the Mindful Caring Box. And in the box, initially I started the box for caregivers, and it would have different lotions and soaps and a blanket and different things to help them take care of themselves. I sourced the products so that they were as pure as possible. with 4 or less ingredients, preferably just one,
Right.
and to try to help them to support themselves in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Take a moment and take care of you.
Right.
And I also started working with different facilities and doing presentations for their caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
and to try to help them to understand the importance of taking care of someone else and to take care of yourself and then do that for that person. One of the things that I used to and still do, I tell people is, sometimes after we take a shower and we're in a hurry, because it seems like we're always in a hurry, and we're in a hurry and we just take the lotion and just rub it all over ourselves. No, get a balm or something that's more substantial, so that you have to rub it.
Right.
And so when you're taking care of someone, don't just use that little bit of lotion, but get a balm that is thick. And so you have to spend time
Right.
caring for your person and loving on them a little bit, even if you don't say anything,
Right.
but just taking that extra time. And so those were some of the things that I used to teach caregivers how to do, to take care of themselves as well as their loved one, or even if it wasn't a loved one, if it was your job.
Right.
This is something that's important. And so I started with a box. The box moved to, the box for the care recipient.
Yes.
And I would put certain things in the box. If it was a person who had a dementia, the throw would have a knotted tassel on the end that would give them something to rub on their fingers,
Right.
because we know, they like to rub things. It would have a warmie, a weighted teddy bear in it, so they could hold on to, with lavender scents, so they could, smell it. And that would kind of affect some of their other senses. I would put a brush in there with plastic bristles, but with little beads on the end of the bristles to stimulate their scalp.
Right.
And so that would help when the caregiver is brushing their hair, male or female.
Right.
Still same scalp stimulation to try to calm. I would put a coloring book,
Right.
and crayons in there. And so just different things to help.
Yeah.
And I thought that's all I was going to do.
Right.
I got this box, and I'm going to give boxes away. If you decide you want to buy a box, that's great, because you buy one, that gives me the ability to give another one away. But what I found was in the community, especially in Black and Brown community,
Right.
underserved community, whether it's Black, Brown, or other, underserved community, that the need was so great for information, for resources,
Right.
for services. People don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And they think they're doing the best that they can, and they are with what they have, without knowing that there's so much else out there to help you. And so then the desire came to bring that information,
Right.
to those who needed it the most. So we started doing brain health and care symposiums, where we would bring together someone from doctors from Emory University
Okay.
would come and talk about dementia and Alzheimer's and the clinical technical piece. And I would bring in an elder care attorney to talk about the things that you need to have in order, not just for your care recipient, but for yourself. A nutritionist who would come in to talk about different types of foods that are important, and then those that are high in sugar, high in fat, high in other things that you need to try to avoid,
Right.
at least most of the time. Not saying you can't have an ice cream cone every now and then, or a piece of fried chicken. I tell folks, you have some fried chicken, just not every day.
Right.
Preferably not every week.
Right.
Preferably not every month.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't have it at all. And so different people would come in to bring information, and then we would have vendors who would give out resources and those types of things. So we started with a brain health and care symposium. Then it continued to grow until where we are now, which is a lot. To put it mildly, it's a lot.
And I feel like I should actually give extra context to our viewers as to what brought us together, and also, I guess, my personal interest and passion towards the world that is Alzheimer's and dementia. And as you the lovely way that you put it on your podcast was the Alzheimer journey. or the Alzheimer Road.
The Alzheimer's Road.
The Alzheimer's Road. I apologise. So as we've discussed, in terms of my family, we have 6 people who have Alzheimer's, and sadly 5 have gone on to join the Most High, and the last one that's left is my nana. And you and I connected on this very topic and subject because, as you said, in terms of your own father, this is such a touchy subject for me, and it sits so heavy and so deep in my heart and in my soul, because as we've talked about, and what we can share is there's so many layers to this, there's so many nuances to it, there's so many things that us as people who are directly connected to people with this condition can actually share. And this is the mission of this podcast, is to be of service and to help others and to keep everybody connected, because we are all by default connected, but just keep the conversation going and communicate and open up a space for people to reach out to yourself, reach out to me and ask questions, because we know what the statistics are, and they just keep going up. And also within that, there's actually a lack of answers to so many questions that we're asking. One that we particularly have just discussed that I feel that would be very beneficial to our viewers is the difference in care, in particular location. So what I shared on your podcast was that my family have majority been kept at home when they've had the condition and taken care of as the family, because that's more of a thing, I could say, for our Caribbean community. It's probably for other communities as well, but I can only speak for my own. We are a community where we will say we take care of our own. And what I shared with you was that we saw the benefits of that, because we actually had a comparison within the family of one family member who actually went into a care facility, and she actually got the condition after everybody else. However, her demise was rapid in comparison to the others who stayed at home and we took care of them. Would you mind sharing your stance on, because I guess you said that your father was more in line with my auntie who went into a care facility, and I guess we can discuss and share with everybody the comparison.
Absolutely. The one thing that I didn't share, my father was the second in his, there are several in our family line. There were several first cousins.
Okay.
My father, and then several second cousins. My father's second cousin was the first in the family to be diagnosed. Yeah. And my grandparents, that line, none of them were diagnosed with any type of dementia. Mm-hmm. And so in my father's generation, there were several. My father was the second. Mm-hmm. And then I have a cousin who was actually in my generation. She was diagnosed early onset. It's the same time as my father was diagnosed. Mm. And then my father's first cousin's wife was diagnosed. And then my father's, and in that family, that first cousin, there are 3 siblings. Mm. Then one of the siblings was diagnosed. Then the second one was diagnosed. Mm. And the third one, who is still with us, she's diagnosed. Wow. And so in that generation, there have been at least 5 who were diagnosed. Now, the reason I'm sharing that is because the majority of the others were at home.
Right.
My father, who I was second power of attorney. His wife, who's my stepmother, was his first power of attorney. So even though I had a little bit of leeway, I could not really make decisions that she didn't want to have made. Right. One of the decisions was for him not to be at home. Right. And regardless of how I said, your cooking is better, they're feeding them crap, Daddy never ate processed food, and now he's eating processed food. He never had drank lemonade and Kool-Aid, and now he's drinking that kind of stuff with all of that sugar in it. He doesn't need that kind of food, and he needs some more one-on-one care, regardless of how I pleaded. The response was no. So Daddy entered assisted living, which in their area, Sun City Center, Florida, which is a retirement community. That particular facility was supposed to be the best at the time. I learned that it doesn't matter how much you pay, doesn't matter how much your net worth is, or that as my father, who was an Army and an Air Force vet, doesn't matter.
Right.
The care that you receive sometimes is not what you expect. And my father entered the facility in September of 2017. And he left this earth in April of 2018. And I tell people in May of 2017, my father was driving. And less than a year later, he was gone.
Wow.
And I do believe, even if it may not have prolonged his life, him being at home would have given him a better quality of life.
100%.
Yeah.
100% agree. Because, as I said, we've got enough members in our family to make the comparison, and then you've just basically reiterated what I'm saying, and I'm across the other side of the Atlantic, so I'm like, there's no coincidences,
Right.
The writing's on the wall, the evidence is there. So in terms of what narrative do they give over here in the States in terms of any causes? What do they say here? That is, rabbit hole. That's still a big question mark, because they say that the comorbidities, high blood pressure, diabetes, those things can cause a dementia. Whether it's vascular dementia or Alzheimer's, can cause a dementia. But there's still a big question mark. We don't know. Right.
And, that you should exercise, lose weight if you're overweight, and all of those things. My father was a size medium all of my life until he went into the assisted living facility. And within a matter of 3 months, I was buying him size large because they were feeding them processed food. And so Daddy was a size medium for all the years that I knew him. And Daddy did not eat junk. He did have high blood pressure, which, according to my doctor, is genetic.
Right.
And so it wasn't caused, and Daddy didn't eat a bunch of fried chicken and all that kind of stuff. So it had nothing to do with his diet. They had a pool. Daddy bought a wetsuit so that he could swim even when the temperatures were low. And Daddy did 40 laps a day.
Right.
And he rode his bike. So it wasn't that he was not active, because he was. Daddy was an accountant. And after he retired, he still did taxes for other people. And when they moved to the retirement community, he would go to the clubhouse and do taxes for free, as well as teach some of the seniors how to use the computer. So his mind was continuously active.
Right.
And so those are some of the things that they say, you need to do to try to avoid getting a dementia.
Right.
Daddy was doing all those things.
Right.
He was eating right. He regularly went to the doctor. And I tell people, my father beat. Daddy had prostate cancer.
Right.
He had stomach cancer.
Wow.
And he had lung cancer.
Wow.
He beat all of those.
Right.
And then Alzheimer showed up. And the why, who knows? Who knows? Could it have been, some of the medications, that's one area, some of the things Daddy was taking, because he was on a lot of different medications. Could that have been a precursor? You don't know. And then there are other people who, when you look at their brains after they're gone, their brains say that they should have been waist deep in Alzheimer's.
Wow.
No signs or symptoms.
Wow.
And so it's hard to say, if you do this, you're going to get it. If you don't do this, you're not going to get it. You can't say that.
This is such a fascinating subject and journey, because it's like, as I say, in terms of our family in particular, of the 6 of them, 5 were sisters, and it was 3 in the UK and 2 of them back home in Jamaica. So as much as then, it drew up a different conversation, because we're like, okay, is it hereditary because it's the same family and they're sisters? But then you're like, but they live in completely different parts of the world, and like so many things. I mean, so basically the doctors were saying it's not hereditary. And then we're like, okay, is it, as you said, diet, medication? It's clearly not location, because they're in different locations, it's different environments, so many things. I feel like it's going to be an ongoing investigation for me in particular, and I can see you're definitely doing the work as well, but I'm like, some answers need to get presented very soon, because
depending on who you talk to, some researchers will say there is a genetic tendency. Others will say, heredity doesn't have any part in it. But then when you have, like in your case, 5 siblings, in my case, 3 siblings, and all of them are on the Alzheimer's road or have left this earth because of Alzheimer's, you just never know. Right. And then in my generation, we've only had 1 so far that I know of. Right. But you never know. But then her parents, neither of her parents had Alzheimer's or another dementia. So,
and I guess another thing that's very important in this conversation and the work you're doing is kind of taking us back to the carers, because we know that it's a whole subject in terms of the person who's got the condition themselves, and we all rally around and do our best to support them. But the thing that makes me really respect and appreciate your work as well is the work that you're doing, as you say, for caring for the carers, and being somebody who's coming from a family where we're all chipping into care or have chipped into care. In my own case, I've seen the good, the bad and the ugly of what happens to carers, and I'm so glad that you're highlighting that carers need care too, basically. Yes. What advice would you give for, because I know you've got your actual items and you've got your things set up, but okay, maybe for people who is a bit more of a challenge or a bit more of a distance in accessing your work, do you have any advice for to help a carer care for themselves? I guess mentally, spiritually, physically, what they can do, like right now, watching this episode, what could you advise them to do to start caring for themselves?
The first thing that I like to tell caregivers is you're not in it alone, and stop trying to be in it alone, because most caregivers, they block themselves and their loved one off in a silo. I'm the one that's doing this. I'm the one that's taking care. Nobody can do it better than me. And so first you need to lose that mindset, because even though you may be the best person in the world to take care of your loved one, you're not the only person in the world who can pitch in to help. And so when someone asks, what can I do? Tell them, can you go to the store for me? Or can you sit with mom, grandmom, while I go get my hair done, while I go get my nail, while I just go to the park and look at the squirrels? Can you just give me some time? Because one of the main things that you need is time. The second thing that they need to understand is there's life after caregiving.
Right.
And oftentimes we get so bombarded with, this is what I have to do right now, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the next several years. Well, that also causes the caregiver to leave this earth before the person they're caring for. Right. And the percentage of caregivers who do not live longer than the person they're caring for is ridiculous. It's somewhere around 40%. Wow. It's a ridiculous number because we don't take care of ourselves. The other thing is to know that you hear it all the time. You can't pour from an empty cup. Right. But then the question is, okay, so what's empty about my cup and how can I fill it? And sometimes that just takes, you just need to take a minute to reflect on what is it that you need right now. when my father was going through his journey, there was a person who helped me.
Wow.
And her name was Sandra. And Sandra had cared for her mom, who had Alzheimer's, and her mom predeceased her. Sandra before her mom, she cared for her sister. Sandra's husband was also paraplegic, so she was caring for her husband.
Wow.
Sandra wasn't caring for herself. And after her mom passed, she found out she had leukemia. And so I came into the picture because she had started doing a lot to support caregivers. She had a support group, and she was working with other agencies, and she wanted me to shadow her so that when she wasn't able to do it, then I would take over. And so got to know her, really well, some of the work that she was doing. And the month before my father passed, Sandra passed. And I tell people that story because, who knows? Often, we hear when it's your time, regardless.
Right.
But that quality of the time that you have is important. And so you have to start learning how to take care of yourself. Go to your doctor's appointments. If something doesn't feel right, look right, go have it taken care of. Get rest. We hear all the time, and I'm one of the worst ones to say, you need to get your 7 hours of sleep because, when I get my 7 hours of sleep, I'm like, yes, because it doesn't happen as often as it should.
Yeah.
But you have to be smart with taking care of yourself. You're going to give all to your loved one.
Right.
Give all to yourself because you have to do it first. You still have that North Star. It may be buried somewhere, but your North Star is there. What are your aspirations? What do you want to do with your life? Aside from being a caregiver.
Right.
Those goals should still be there. Being a caregiver shouldn't stop any of that. And so those are some of the things. There's a lot. But the last thing I would leave with a caregiver is there are resources out there.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to look. The internet is a wonderful thing now. And so don't be afraid to say, I need help. Where can I find help?
Yeah.
And because if you don't ask, as someone taught me a few years ago, closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Right.
And so if people don't know what you need, they don't know how to help.
Thank you for that. I've seen, because as much as that makes all the sense in the world and you presented it so beautifully, I've seen when people have been so immersed in the care and you made the point of when they just put themselves in a silo with the person, it's like they're just boxed into, and they even though their heart probably wants to do everything you've just said, it's like they're in a dark room. They can't see the rest of the world anymore.
Right.
I've witnessed that in real life. So I say that to say, what advice would you maybe give to people outside of the person who has the condition and their immediate carer? Extended people, is there any advice you could give in terms of them helping that person, I guess, to escape that mental prison?
My daughter uses a term, she says, I'll say, what's wrong? And she'll say, I'm fine. I'm fine. You need to know that they're not fine. If you're close enough to ask or to see that someone might need help, observe. They may not say, yes, I need you to do something. Offer. Let me come over and sit with you for a while. You know what? We haven't seen each other in so long, and I just want to come and just lay eyes on you and talk to you for a little bit. And then when you're there, then say, you know what? I'm going to stay here for a little bit and talk to Grandma. Why don't you go and do something? Get yourself some tea or, go do something else. Don't wait for someone who is a caregiver to say, I need help, because more than likely they're not going to ask for it. And it's not because they're not overwhelmed. It's because they're too overwhelmed to even know what to ask.
Right.
They don't even know how to say, I need to go get a prescription from the drugstore. I need to go get some groceries. I need to go get my hair done. They don't know how to do that. And so as a friend, as a family member, you have to be observant enough to just offer.
Right.
And don't take no for an answer. Well, no, the house is a mess. You can't come over right now. Girl, I've seen your house. Your house, it doesn't matter. Let me come over and help you clean it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I come and do that? Mm-hmm. And don't take no for an answer. And if you do finally have to acquiesce to that first no, then the next day ask again. Right. And eventually they may say, girl, come on over. Okay, I need to see you too. Mm-hmm. But don't take no for an answer. That's my biggest piece of advice for family members and friends.
Thank you. That's great advice. I was just thinking, in terms of those who this could be a new journey for them, what advice would you give or suggestions would you give, or I wouldn't say warning, I need a better word, that bring to their attention in terms of the journey they're about to go down? Do you have anything you could share that would help?
The first thing I would say is, when you get good advice, take it and follow through on it. One of the biggest problems that I have is that when it's the beginning of the journey, they don't think that it's going to get more difficult.
Right.
And so some of the things that I may say initially you need to do, for example, make sure that you have all of your loved one's paperwork in order.
Right.
If you haven't met with an elder care attorney, do that. Oftentimes they have a free 20 minutes that you can sit down and do a consultation. So don't think that you can't afford that, to do that, because it's important to have those documents in order.
Right.
I have a couple of folks now who their loved one is too late for them to get power of attorney or those types of things. So now they have to go through the guardianship procedure, which is a lot more difficult than if you had done it on the front end.
Right.
And so make sure that as you're beginning the journey first, make sure that all of the documents are in order. So, and know who's going to handle the finances,
right,
who's going to handle the medical, who's going to handle if there's property, who's going to handle all of that. The second thing is start getting resources. As you go to the doctor, we have a notebook that we, the foundation has, that has forms and documents and information. You need to have a notebook, even if it's just a spiral notebook that has pages in it. You need to have a notebook that you carry with you everywhere. When you go to Dr. A, Dr. B, Dr. C, when you go to the grocery store, these are the things that my loved one likes to eat. These are the things that they shouldn't eat. When you're observing, which is a big piece because you don't know how slowly or quickly the condition is going to progress. Take notes. And so when you go to doctors, instead of trying to remember, this is what happened last week, this is what happened 2 weeks ago, you have it right there, dates, and this is the information. So begin to keep, if you haven't already started keeping a notebook or keeping notes, begin to keep those notes. Keep your medication logs for that loved one. And so those are some of the, as you're just starting this journey, put things in place. You need a support circle, even if you may not need it right now. Grandma is doing great right now. She's even living by herself. She's still, we had to get her a microwave because she can't use that stove anymore, but she's cooking for herself. We just go over to support, every now and then. That's all great and wonderful. Now is the time to get that support circle in line so that when you don't have time to go to the grocery store, you can call Mary, and Mary will go. You know who those people are that you can trust and that you can count on. And so start putting those things in place right now.
I love that because it's basically getting on top of, life admin.
Right. And be proactive. Oftentimes as a caregiver, we're reactionary. That happened. And so we're thrust into making this decision. You want that to happen as little as possible. You want to be proactive. If this happens, then the other. One of the things, and I tell people this, and this is kind of, it's still PG. So,
okay.
Yes, it's still PG. But one of the things that I knew about my father was I knew when he had a urinary tract infection.
Okay.
And I remember I was in Atlanta, they were in Florida. And it was 7:15 in the morning. And it was the day that my daughter was having her photo shoot for her senior pictures. And I got a phone call. And the person said, "Your father is becoming sexual." I said, "My father is 90. What are you talking about?" "Well, your father keeps trying to grab me." I said, "Where is he grabbing you?" "He's trying to grab my genitals." I said, "Is he also trying to grab his genitals?" "Well, yeah." I said, "My 90-year-old father is not trying to tell you that he is trying to be intimate with you. He's trying to tell you he's in pain.
Right.
And he has a urinary tract infection."
Wow.
I'm in Atlanta. She's in Florida with him, up close personal with him.
Right.
I said, "Call the nurse," because at that point I had put him under palliative care. I said, "Call the palliative care nurse." 5 minutes later, the phone rings. It's the nurse, and she says, "Lori, I hear you need me to go look at your father." I said, "Yes, I think he has a urinary tract infection." She says, "I'm on my way." 10 minutes later, she calls me back. "Your father has a urinary tract infection. I haven't sent the specimen to the lab yet, but I'm sure you're right. I've already started him on antibiotics." So know your person. And even though it may look like it's one thing,
Yes.
be sure that it's not something else.
Right.
When Daddy was in the facility, we were trying to lift him from the sofa to put him back in the wheelchair. Every time we tried to lift him up, he would grimace like he was in pain.
Right.
And so we asked the CNA, "Does he have a bed sore?" "Oh, we forgot to tell you." We had to get the wound care people over to deal with his bed sore.
Wow.
Now, like I mentioned before, this is a facility that 7 years ago, I was paying over $5,000 a month for them to care for him. But you can't tell us he has a bed sore. And so know your person. It's not that he doesn't want to get out of the chair. It's that it hurts when he tries. So you have to know the person that you're caring for.
Right. No, that's good. You know, when you was just talking about in terms of, when you was talking about pulling the village together, I guess, and pulling the team together, how do you, there's always going to be an outlier, or one or two or three or five or 10. How do you deal with those who are in denial?
The best way to bring them in is you also have to be observant of them. There is something that they will do. There is something that they may not say to you, "I will do this," but it may be as simple as, "I need you to just keep a log of all the medications. And when we go to the doctor and it changes, just cross it off the list for me." And don't say to them, "This is something you can do to help me." Just, "This is something I need you to do."
Right.
And so know what their strengths and weaknesses are. If they don't want to admit that, Mom has a dementia and it's going to get worse, they may not be ready to hear that.
Right.
But everybody, just about everybody who's reached a certain age takes some kind of pill.
Right.
And is on some form of medication. So that's not saying this is for Alzheimer's or this is because of a dementia. It's just, Mom has to take these medications and it's taking too much out of me to keep track of that. So can you do that for me? More than likely, they're going to say yes. Because that's something really, really simple to do. They're not doing anything but crossing off a list. You're going to keep track of it, of course. And then that will help them to then know that, okay, there's something that I can be of use to. And then give them something else. And so you want to slowly move them into the fold. Now, there's always going to be one somewhere who is going to keep their head in the sand. And who is not going to want to have any parts of it, any way, shape, form, or fashion, even coming to Christmas dinner. They're not going to want to do that. You're going to have to let them be at peace with that. And then you're going to have to be at peace with that. Because getting frustrated because your sister or your brother or Daddy won't do, that's just going to make the whole situation worse. But if you can find those little things, Mama likes grits for breakfast. Daddy, can you go fix Mama some grits?
Right.
Just something really, really easy for them to feel like, because oftentimes they don't want to be involved because they don't know how.
Right.
They don't know how they can be of use. What can I do? I'm not going to change a bedpan or a depend. I'm not going to do that. I can't give a bath. I don't want to do that. You can fix some instant grits.
Right.
There's something simple that you can do. Oatmeal.
Right.
Whatever it is. But you have to also, as the person who is the primary caregiver, you have to know what the people that you may want to assist, you have to know their strengths and weaknesses and what they can tolerate and what they can't.
Yeah.
Can't tolerate giving a bath, but I can tolerate putting a TV dinner in the microwave.
Right.
Something simple.
No, that's brilliant. And I'm sure that's going to help a lot of people, definitely, because I've seen the frustration when certain people are in denial, and then it then becomes a war. Because then it's just, energy swirling and resentment and all the things start happening. So, no, I really appreciate that. But I'm also thinking about, so we've gone from the beginning, I guess, shall we skip to the end, and, when our loved ones and the people we're caring for, transition. What advice would you give to people who have, I guess, dedicated their heart, their energy, their love, their work, their time to that person, and then that person, goes to rest? What advice would you give them in terms of transitioning back to self, because they've been so selfless for so long? As we've discussed, people can lose themselves. What advice would you give in terms of people regrouping and finding self again after that? Because you shared a statistic that was a hard statistic earlier that we'll sit here and try and help to prevent, in terms of, when people transition, their carers transition into,
That's a good question. One of the things, and we haven't talked about this, but the next book that I'm working on is called Grief and Dying. And because one of the things that even though, you realize things, you see things, you may have so much going on in your life that you don't really want to tackle that one thing right then. But it's been coming up a lot more. My loved one is gone. My loved one is transitioning. I can't handle it. Or now what do I do?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I tackle is grief is a process that never ends.
Right. And
oftentimes we get bogged down because we want to make ourselves come out of it. Snap out of it. They're gone. You got to snap. No, you don't have to snap out of it. It could be 20 years.
Right.
Grief is a process that never ends.
Right.
You're always going to grieve that person, especially if you cared for them, you loved them. You're going to miss them.
Right.
You're always going to grieve. Let yourself do that.
Yeah.
But also understand, and understanding takes different levels, but know that you're important too.
Right.
Get help when you need help. It could just be talking to a friend. It could be a little deeper than that. You may need to get some professional help to help you to go through that process, not just of the grief, but of the living, because you're still here.
Right.
You still got to live. You got to eat, you got to sleep. You may still have to go to work, or you may have to get back into trying to make a living, to care for yourself. You may have other children, a spouse that you have to care for. So you have to understand that it's okay to grieve, but it's as important to live. And oftentimes it comes with doing simple things like journaling. I heard a song today. It reminded me of Mom. When I listened to this song, it was one of those songs that I could hear Mom singing it every morning when she got us ready for school. Write it down, journal it, bring yourself a smile. When you feel yourself beginning to feel a certain way, try to distract yourself by doing other things. Color. Get a coloring book. Do something that allows you to think and to remember, but also gives you something else to focus on at the same time. So we're not saying get rid of the memories, clean out the house, get rid of everything that reminds you of your loved one. We're not saying that. I have a recording of my father. When I recorded it, it was not because I wanted to have something later,
right?
Because Daddy was still at home, and so we weren't thinking that this is what was going to happen. But I'll tell this short story. My father was a computer whiz.
Okay.
But as the dementia progressed, he forgot, and so Daddy had this system where he would pay bills when the bills came in. Water bill, light bill. The bill came in. He'd put it on the left side of the computer. He had a certain day of the month that he would take care of the bills. He'd do it on the computer. Then those bills would go on the right side. He had a basket on the right side of the computer. And then on a certain day, he would file everything. Well, Daddy started forgetting his passwords. And so he had like 5 little black books where he would write passwords down. Then he'd forget, and then he'd forget where the book was. So he'd go get another book and he'd write down. So me trying to figure out which password went with what.
Yeah.
So he got to the point where he would take his laptop to the bank because he forgot his banking passwords. So he would take the laptop to the bank and tell them, I need you to help me, remember my passwords. And we would tell him over and over, Daddy, they can't do that. So one day, it was a Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, Daddy forgot his passwords. I was trying to pay the bills.
Right.
Daddy forgot the banking password. Real simple phone call. We just need to call them, Daddy, and I just need you to tell them that you want to reset your password.
Right.
That was an hour-and-a-half conversation.
Wow.
And it went on. And I said, Daddy, you're going to forget. I'm going to record what you're saying because you're going to forget that you're saying this.
Right.
And I need to replay it for you.
Yeah.
And that's how I started the recording. So finally, hour-and-a-half into this, it's Thanksgiving Eve night. I said, Daddy, we can't do it tomorrow. Because he said, well, we can do it in the morning, baby. We can do it No, Daddy, tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Probably not going to be there. I'm leaving on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. We've got to get this done now. 8:01, he says, okay, go ahead. 8:01, they're closed. And so it was, he had a system. I'm trying to work the system. He's not helping me with this system. So when you have memories and things like that, you have something that you can laugh about.
Yes.
When you're going down memory lane, don't go down the memory lane of, I just watched him die in my arms. No. My father was a hoot. I remember when he did. Think about those kinds of things.
Definitely.
As you're remembering. Remember the good things, not the, he forgot me.
Right.
He forgot you, but what did he remember about you?
Yeah.
Like I tell folks, Daddy called me bright eyes. What did he remember about you? So start having those as your first thoughts. And not the fact that the person isn't here being your first thought. And of course, so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
It all takes practice,
right.
And it's a process. And so don't forget the process.
I love that. And I totally agree with you. It definitely helps because as I've shared on this podcast, lost many people. I always say I'm related to about 1 billion people, and so therefore, as much as I get a chance to love so many people, there comes a time in life where a lot of them are transitioning. I feel like at my age, I'm close to about 30 people that I've lost and had to lay to rest, which, as you can imagine, is not easy.
Right.
So I hear what you're saying because that's actually had to become a part of my life. It's in terms of my management of grief of so many people, you know. I love that. Well, in terms of when you've mentioned journals, I need to do a plug of your journal because you just gifted me a wonderful gift, and I'm going to allow you to speak about the wonderful works that is you. So I'll hand it to you and you can tell the world all about it.
Thank you. Even though this is my 5th or 6th book, and it's actually my 2nd journal, this is probably one that I would have to say I'm most proud of. It was a labor of love, even though it is a journal, because it was hard to do it. And it's called The Pause. And because even if you're a caregiver, if you're not a caregiver, we all need to take a pause. And I tell folks, I joke with folks, and I tell them, I just want to take a bath. I haven't had a bath in 15 years. I just want to take a bath. We need to pause. And I wrote this, I needed something simple, because oftentimes you tell caregivers to journal. I don't have time for that. Of course you don't, but of course you do. If it's the right kind of journaling, it could be a sentence. It could be a word. It doesn't have to be, let me pour my brain into 10 pages before I go to bed. Yeah. And so I created The Pause, which is, as the caption says, a gentle space to reconnect with yourself 2 pages at a time. And at the beginning of the journal, I have some information and things, but there are 104 entries, 2 for every day of the week. And so there, when you open it up there, it tells you what the entries are for 52 weeks for an entire year. And then it just gives you a couple of things to think about twice a week. Yeah. And you don't have to write a lot. You don't have to write at all. Just read it and think about it. I showed this book to, didn't give it to her. I think you're the 2nd or 3rd person I've given it to, because it is not available just yet. But I gave it to her, and she hadn't flipped the pages. She was here. We were at a friend's birthday dinner in a restaurant. I had given the book to the friend as her birthday present. This was like 2 weeks ago. Okay. And I said, show Anita the book. And we're sitting at the dinner table, nice plush restaurant, right? And we're talking, and I look over and she's crying. I'm thinking, oh Lord, did I put something in the book that shouldn't have been in there? Did I put something? I don't think I put anything about her in the book, and I couldn't figure out why she's crying. Yeah. And so I said, what's wrong? What is it? And she says, give me a minute, And so we're looking at each other like, and she said, these are questions that I need to answer for myself. Right. And I have not wanted to even think about. Yeah. But these are things that you need to think about. Even if you don't write the answer down, you need to think about it. And I did not know how much this was going to touch someone. And she's not a caregiver. Right. And so that's why I say this is one of my best works. And in the middle of the book, in 2 different spaces, I'll see if I can find it really quickly. Okay. In the middle of the book, it kind of lets you stop and think for a minute. And it gives you some things to do. And so the first one is your 1-minute breathing exercise. You don't have to, people say, well, I can't meditate because it takes too long. It takes a minute. Yeah. And so this kind of gives you an idea of, your 1 minute inhale, 4 counts, exhale 6, repeat. That's it. Right. Sometimes when you get so bogged down and you can't think, just take a 1 minute. Yeah. 1 minute and just breathe. So in the middle, it just gives you a few, without the lines, without the anything, just some lovely pictures to just pause for a moment. But this is The Pause, and we are creating a course that will launch end of January, 1st of February to go along with The Pause. So I'm really, really excited about that. But so it excites me to give it to you.
I really appreciate this. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And I hold it dear. And it was worth traveling across the ocean for. Love it. No, this has been amazing. And do you have any words that you'd like to share with the viewers before we complete?
Absolutely. Whether you are a caregiver or not, whether you have someone, know someone who is on the Alzheimer's or dementia road or not, you are still important. And you are number one. If you're not 100, you can't help anybody else to be 100. And so sometimes all you have to do is pause. Just take a breath, take a moment. And in that pause, think about, what can I do to support me so that I can be a better support for somebody else? So if I, take anything else away from this, please take that you are important and you are worthy of a pause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Laurie. This has been amazing, a true blessing, not only to myself, but I know there's going to be so many people who benefit from your work and your wise words and just your advice. And I salute you. You're amazing. And thank you for blessing my podcast and blessing everybody who's going to see this.
Absolutely. And she didn't tell you a lot of this, but just wait till you see her in the purple chair.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that as well. So you have to see the purple chair as well.
Yes, I will put that in the description so everyone can click on that and tune in and see that as well. So thank you for that. And I conclude this episode of the Sense Only podcast. This has been amazing. As you can see, I've travelled far and it's totally worth it. I hope that everybody takes a lot away from this and have found new insights and new information in terms of not only dementia and Alzheimer's itself, but also what carers go through. And if you're a carer yourself, I hope you take some of this advice and actually implement it. And remember that as much as you're caring for your loved one, care for yourself, and there's so many other people who care for you too. So from my heart, from Dr. Laurie's heart to you, stay blessed.